Before recovery, I was used to using pretty defined methods of measurement to see how my progress was going. So things like calorie tracking, macro tracking, scales, measuring tape, before and after photos, things like that to measure how I'm doing with weight loss, right? And ever since recovery, I've really let those things go. Not that those things are inherently bad. I just feel that when you're trying to step away from being consumed with thoughts of losing weight and things like that, the tracking involved in making sure that you are recovering and you're healing your relationship to food, those things kind of seem to kind of get in the way. At least for me, everyone's a little bit different, but definitely personally, I did not find those things helpful. I held on to one of those, and that was the scale. I held on to the scale because it was just in my bathroom, easy to access. It didn't feel like it was really a bother having it there because I didn't step on the scale every day. And also, I had grown accustomed to this idea that, the number on the scale isn't the end all be all. It doesn't define my worth, yada, yada, yada. And I truly, genuinely believed that at some point. But somewhere along the way, that really stopped being the case. I think somewhere along the lines of when the number on the scale was bigger than I had ever seen it before, it really just started to impact me more than it ever had in the past. Because what would happen was, at least in the beginning, I knew that I was gaining weight. I could feel it. But because of some of my body dysmorphia, I didn't really trust my perception of weight gain. So I would step on the scale to re-verify, to verify that I am indeed gaining weight. And surely enough, it did, produce that result. And I was like, okay, so I have gained weight. And I was okay with that at first. But then somewhere along in my recovery, my eating habits had started to I felt they had started to regulate. I wasn't binging anymore. Sure, I was still eating freely, of course, and, but I genuinely felt like where I was at that moment versus when I first started were like night and day is what I felt. So I decided to step on the scale because I was like, I probably lost some weight that I had initially gained. And sure enough, no, I had gained more weight. And that really, I just started having thoughts like, when does this end? When does this stop? And it became more of a preoccupation with the weight. Like, am I going to just keep gaining weight? I was so worried. And reasonably so. I started off already at a weight, when I started my recovery, at a weight that was much higher than the highest I'd ever been. So to go from that into recovery and then see the weight gain just continue was really scary. I didn't get on the scale again. I continued in my recovery. I kept pushing through. And then at one point I started noticing like, I am feeling like my eating habits are getting even better. I'm choosing the quote unquote healthier option, aka things that make me feel good physically, as well as like it tastes good. And I just noticed that I stopped impulsively eating things that I usually would, things like dessert, things like just snacking very often. Not to say any of those things are inherently bad. Let me just put that out there. But it just wasn't like, I started listening to myself more and I noticed that I didn't want those things as much. So of course, in the back of my mind, I can't help it. I just, years and years of weight loss and my background in nutrition and health and as a personal trainer, it's kind of hard not to know that 1 + 1 = 2. You know what I mean? That like, if these things are going down, I'm probably also going to see some weight loss. Like, this is where weight loss kind of kicks in. And I hate that that's something that I can just so quickly recognize. But I do, and I can't help it. It's just kind of like the knowledge that I have back there. So I went on the scale again, and sure enough, I had lost weight. And suddenly, for the following days, it was like all I could think about when it came to food choices. I was like, oh, if I eat this, am I gonna just gain all the weight back? Like, oof, I ate that earlier. Am I just gonna gain all that weight back? Like, all of a sudden it became about weight again. And I was like, dang, this is not good. This is not the direction that I want to be going. If the scale is gonna make me like preoccupy myself about weight, then I just don't need to use it. There was a time in my life where I could get on the scale every single morning, and no matter what the scale said, it would impact me for just the moment that I saw this number, let's say. But after that, I was able to really quickly shake it off and not worry about it. So that I just wanted that version of me back. So that's why I think I kept the scale around and didn't have any problem weighing myself in the beginning of this recovery. But I'm just not there. I'm just not there at that point where I can get on the scale and just have it like, just, it's fine. And I think it's partially because I'm at the heaviest that I've ever been. And that, whether I like it or not, does create some insecurity in me, especially when I see the number for myself. And I can't help but end up being preoccupied by it. Part of what makes recovery so difficult when you're in it is because it can feel like you're in the middle of the ocean. Not sure if you're making progress because you have nothing to really reference sometimes. It feels like the references are very vague. So you don't really know, like, I'm swimming in a direction that I think will lead me to land, let's say, or to my destination. But because there's no real specific point of reference, it can be hard to not feel like maybe I'm swimming in place and maybe I'm not making any progress. And I'm just here, like, just sacrificing myself, So it's understandable to want to measure something. And I think I've come up with 3 things that I have personally used to measure my progress, and that has given me kind of some of my sanity back in all of this. And hopefully this can provide some insight on a way that you could measure your progress if you're also currently in recovery. Okay, before I get into this, I want to preface, I'm actually going to bring you guys along with me to the gym. Now, I hope this isn't triggering for you guys to see me working out. I am simply just giving you something else to look at other than my face as I talk about these 3 ways. So I did kind of want to test things out. I love cinematography. I love videography. So I just kind of wanted to switch it up for you guys. And let me know what you guys think. If you guys hate it, then it is what it is. And we did it once and we tried it and that was it. But hopefully you guys don't hate it. I hope I don't hate it as I'm editing it. This is not a workout with me type video. So I'm not showing you guys everything I do for a warm up. I'm not showing you guys everything I do for a cool down. I'm just kind of showing you guys what I could because I'm not used to recording myself in the gym. So a little bit awkward, and there were things that I was like, I'm not really gonna record this moment, or I would simply forget. I'm not gonna lie, I forgot there in the beginning and in the end. So yeah. Before I detail you guys this list, I want to be clear that no matter what, you must take the comparative self approach. Meaning, I know that you naturally will want to compare your recovery to mine or anyone else's that you hear about, because that's what I continuously wanted to do as I started my recovery. But always know that the best measurement of your progress will be when you compare your old average tendencies and habits, impulses, thought patterns, and just your overall wellness to your current ones. So number one, we're going to focus in on interrupted thought patterns. So let me tell you now that the best way to be cognizant of this measurement of progress is to, don't hate me for saying this, but it's to journal. If you are already journaling, then this should be a walk in the park. But if you aren't and you're anything like I was, you've probably tried to journal in the past and couldn't seem to make it a habit. I remember when I used to buy new journals and cute pens thinking it would help motivate me. It didn't, but eventually I figured it out, and I don't journal every day, but I do make a point to journal at least once a week. And with recovery, it's been super instrumental in keeping record of my progress. So whether you journal or not, noticing the following will prove beneficial. Journaling just cements it into your memory so that you can call on it if you are having doubts about how far you've progressed along your journey. We want to know when our thought patterns are interrupted, meaning they are beginning to change. This might look like curiosity. So whenever we stray from our usual thoughts and begin questioning them, it is a huge sign that we are making progress and are beginning to view food, our body, and ourselves in general differently. The other noteworthy interruption can look like replacement. So we may start off with curiosity, but eventually we will begin to notice a different thought come into focus. This is done pretty intentionally, but requires less and less work as we start to develop a better mindset around our food choices and our body image. Replacement comes right before the automatic thought changes and no longer requires curiosity or replacement. Please remember that no matter who you are, we all have negative and or pessimistic thoughts about ourselves and even the world, meaning that you will likely still come across old thought patterns after recovery, but won't allow them to overtake your better judgment for the most part. Number two is all about making choices versus restrictions. So in the beginning of recovery, choosing to go into recovery is of the utmost importance. So what I found was that I was most concerned about leaning into the experience more than anything else. So when it came to food choices, I would really just eat what I was already eating. And since I was having more mental and emotional type of restrictions, my central choice was full of permission more than anything else. Side note, if you guys want to learn more about what types of restriction there are, you guys should check out my last video. As my recovery progressed, I recognized that I was beginning to stop myself from eating less, and I held back from choosing the quote-unquote healthier option because I was worried that it was coming from a place of restriction. And then it became clear to me that I was restricting again, but just in the opposite direction. I think it's a good indication of progress when you start to choose foods that not only taste good, but feel good too. For example, I could have a donut or pastry for breakfast in the morning, and there were times that that option was available to me, and I felt no guilt about possibly doing it. But I know that it will cause me to feel tired come noon as my blood sugar drops from the morning spike. It's not about weight loss. It's not about good or bad. It's about my well-being. So making choices relies on understanding that there are valid alternative choices to be made. We can also measure progress by recognizing a shift from following impulses to following our intuition when it comes to our food choices. Now, this last one really depends on trial and error and being open to that. So we see it develop over time. It essentially means that there is little to no back and forth going on in your mind as you go about deciding what and when you will eat. There is typically a self-trust that forms as a result of going through that trial and error. So for example, There might be foods that now that you do have the permission to eat, you don't binge on, but you still feel this tendency towards overeating it possibly, or eating it past fullness. And over time, you may find that you reach for it during times of stress, but not out of genuine desire. We'll call this a craving even. And cravings aren't inherently bad, but they also don't have to be indulged if there are better ways for you to meet your needs. I have given in to certain cravings and found enjoyment and fulfillment, but I've also given in to other cravings and found that afterwards a new craving arises, or a desire to eat more of it comes out of nowhere. And that's when I know that the food isn't really what I want. It might be a deeper need I have at the moment, which I'm trying to fulfill through food. This isn't always the case, but through trial and error, I get to know myself and follow my intuition more clearly, because I recognize when I'm being impulsive. And I don't judge that impulsive side. I try to understand it more than anything. Just know that these things will happen in waves. They aren't a constant. For me, I don't always trust my intuition. Sometimes I am going with my impulses, and that's it. And that's as much as I can do that day. Some days I am, forgetting to not restrict even my more, let's say, traditionally quote unquote healthy impulses or desires or cravings, and avoiding them because I think like, no, I'm not trying to lose weight. Why would I choose the salad kind of thing? There are times where I don't interrupt my thought patterns and I let them kind of carry me throughout the day until the end of the day. And then I'm like, damn, it was not a good mental health day. None of these things are supposed to happen just in unison and perfectly. They are meant to happen, especially with lesser frequency in the beginning. And then as you go on, the hope is that they happen more and more often and they become more of the norm. That concludes today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed this format. If you didn't, I guess we won't be doing it again. I'm such a dork. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.